So Species, The Flash Season 6, Episode 4, There Will Be Blood, was a very decent Flash episode, and as I've kind of reiterated in each episode so far, I feel like with each episode that has come to our screens week by week, has really demonstrated quite well this new kind of separate storyline that Eric Wallace is giving to this new season for each character, or should I say characters that are paired up. For example, this episode we kind of had Iris and Ralph, then we had kind of Cisco, Barry, and the new Nash Wells. I feel like this episode, more than any other episode this season so far, granted that we're only 4 episodes in, really is delivering that new kind of experience for the Flash that makes, I feel like if it was filmed in a way in the previous season, a lot less dull, and that's what I'm really liking about this. Plus, this episode provided us with, blood work actually going full on monster blood work. If you think things have been going full steam ahead already, considering we're 4 episodes in, blood work, his arc ends at episode 8, so it's just going to be kind of quite menacing from here on out. But before we get into the details of this episode, guys, and I say what I liked, what I didn't maybe like so much, be sure to go ahead and like this video if you do go on to enjoy it. Also, leave me your thoughts down in the comments below on top of my thoughts, and let me know what you think of just everything in general, and subscribe for more Flash videos like this. So the beginning of the episode kind of pick up from the end of last episode with Barry explaining to the team about him dying in Crisis, and as kind of expected, of course, Cisco isn't just going to sit there and wait around for Barry to get wiped out from antimatter. And in Cisco fashion, this episode saw him go down quite a few holes to try and actually make Barry live, despite Barry saying to just kind of accept it. And this episode in general, everyone, apart from Iris, I guess, because they've shown that enough from her in quite a few ways in the past few episodes, since obviously her being Barry's wife, she is very privy to what is going to happen to him in Crisis. But it's only been more or less recently when Team Flash have actually found out that, okay, Barry is actually going, and this episode drilled that in more than ever, like proper drilled it into each character, and everyone was showing in their own unique way that they can't really accept, or do not really want to accept, that Barry's going to go. And Ralph this episode, I enjoyed Ralph. I'm just going to talk about Ralph really quickly so I can kind of be over and done with that. And I'm only saying it in that way because if you collect all the scenes throughout the episode, there wasn't really so much there other than Iris going to Ralph, helping him out with the Sue Dearborn case, which he's been working on since last summer to no avail. And he was just acting like a bit of a prick to her, to put it quite lightly. And it felt like a bit of force. I was just like, really? Like, what's all of this about? And then a couple of scenes later, you find out that Ralph just really isn't happy about, Barry. You're obviously going to go missing in Crisis. And he even says to Joe in that scene, if I remember correctly, and this is the motivation for his the way he's acting this episode, is why go after Sue Dearborn if he can't even save someone like Barry? But that's when Joe, and wow, Joe this episode, plus Joe this season so far, has already had some killer moments. But once again, with his wise words with Ralph saying, you can't always save everyone, but you can always save someone. And ultimately, he apologized to Iris, and, he said he's got to start work on Sue Dearborn now more than ever, but it's not like he's going to get married or anything, and that was obviously a nice foreshadowing to him actually ending up with Sue Dearborn, as you guys, or some of you may or may not know, is a thing in the comics. And a lot of us have actually been quite excited to see how this would be unraveling this season in terms of Ralph. And to be honest, I didn't actually expect it to kind of tread along this slowly. I thought they would get into it a little bit sooner, but maybe they're saving a bit more of the Ralph and Sue Dearborn proper stuff, maybe post-Crisis. I expect them to get to it a little bit beforehand, but, maybe they are going to flesh it out even further after the crossover. It would make sense. Let's talk about blood work. Now, this episode was the Halloween episode, and it's probably my favorite. Well, I say this, but I can't actually remember Season 2 or Season 3's Halloween stuff, but either way, better than Ragdoll last year. I have to admit, at several times in this episode, especially towards the ending, I'm not saying that this isn't a realistic writing and storyline for a villain in the comics, because this almost felt too comic booky, that when I saw Ramsey act the way he did on screen this episode, especially as I said towards the end where he was like full on vampire mode, right? I felt like maybe it doesn't translate so well, because you see Ramsey at the beginning of this season like a very, humane human, like a nice guy, if that makes sense. Obviously the seeds of like doubt are planted in the viewer's mind where he's quite adamant on defeating death. He even calls his mum a coward. So maybe, I can backstep a little bit, because I am going back and forth on my mind thinking like, is this believable for his character? And what I'm ultimately trying to say here is just how irrational and crazy he got at the end compared to like the version we've seen of him interact with Team Flash, interact with Barry. This episode, he was stealing 10 liters of blood from the hospital. But ultimately, in this episode, we saw attempt after attempt after attempt wasn't really working for him. And I liked how they kind of mixed this in with what would usually be the 7th episode of the season with flashbacks of his mother. And I say the 7th episode because if you remember, episode 7 of season 5 was Cicada's flashback. Season 4 with the Thinker. 7th episode, yet again, Therefore I Am, I think it was called. I could be wrong. And now this season, because we're getting a much different structured season, I guess this was their like little way of trying to throw those details in there, giving a bit of more information as to why Ramsey really doesn't want to die, and basically is all about saying no to death. But before we talk more about blood work, we need to talk about what Barry, Cisco, and the new Nash Wells were doing this episode, as it all connects with that serum. So I actually really like this Wells. I've seen quite a few of your guys' comments in the comment sections down below saying I think the Wells thing is kind of dying out now. Now, whilst I do agree with that to an extent, maybe, you know, you should say goodbye to something before it does kind of overstay its welcome, and it has for some people. For me, I'm kind of like one of those people who kind of knows that might be happening, but I still don't want Tom Cavanaugh to leave the show because I feel like it's just something I'm cradling and I don't want to let go of, if that makes sense. But I would say that this Harrison Wells is a combination of all of them almost, and I really like what Tom Cavanaugh is doing with the character. I like that he's a bit more hands-on, because in this episode where he introduces to Barry and Cisco a solution to blood work situation, or at least this serum, which was actually found during the Invasion crossover, I believe, because it's a Dominator serum that can act as this like bioregenerative serum capable of healing organic tissue no matter what the damage. So I guess that it was meant to heal blood work if he wasn't so far along in his cancer. But you know, when they were saying it was going to cure Barry, that was kind of confusing me a bit. Like, not cure him, but like prevent him from death, because Cisco, as we learned in the episode, decided to pretend to everyone that it wasn't even there in the first place, and he actually stole it, because we know this episode, just like Cisco would do any day, he would always want to try and save Barry. But what I'm wondering, did Cisco believe if Barry was to take this cure, would it prevent his cells from like disintegrating in Crisis? Because as we know, this season we got to see that future Flash vision of him dying in Crisis. I guess the logic to this was if he took that serum, his cells wouldn't break away. We had some really, really good scenes between Barry and Cisco, and I feel like we haven't had an emotional moment like that between Barry and Cisco in a long time. And those are the moments that I really subscribe to, because that's what early Flash felt like in season 1 and season 2 and stuff. So to get that between these two was really, really great when they were talking about accepting and moving on from Barry's death after he's gone, and even leading the team. But I have to admit, it did take a couple of steps backward when Barry was like, maybe I made the wrong choice. I was like, really, man? That was such a good scene. Did you have to include that line in there? I don't know if any of you felt that way, because it just felt like, come on, Barry, you can understand why Cisco would be doing this. But either way, I'm really enjoying this whole dynamic that's going on with each and every character in the episode. And I believe there was a Star Wars reference from Nash Wells saying this is where the fun begins, back to Anakin in episode 3 when he's in the ship and they're flying towards General Grievous's flagship. Bit of a Star Wars nerd moment there, but I can't take this is where the fun begins any other way. I know it was said in Star Wars another time, but Anakin's prequel moment is what is solidified in my brain. Now let's get back to Bloodwork, the man who is obsessed with not dying. And as I said, I really like what they're doing with this, but it also just feels like almost a bit too rushed. Now I never thought I would be saying that, just because I'm all about the more accelerated main plot stuff. But yet again, as I was mentioning in this review, if this was on paper, you would just believe maybe that this character just went all evil for like, you know, because I want to live. But it's just, I feel like the way they've portrayed this human character, it almost is a bit too monstrous, with his obsession with not dying, to the point where he was a doctor who would help people, but now he's just killing them at the end of it. I don't know. Maybe you could argue something to do with his bloodwork powers makes him a bit, I don't know, crazy and impulsive and stuff. But I just felt like, I don't know if I'm really believing that this guy who just took this cure from Barry is really going to go about murdering people. Like, it just felt like a bit, I guess I'm just going to have to swallow it. I would probably believe it if it was on a comic book page, so I guess that's what they're doing. So this is where we see the Halloween episode go full on out. Ramsey has gone to the hospital to kill more or less everyone there because he believes himself to be the answer of the greatest mystery of all, eternal life. So he's gone full on. I'm not calling him blood work anymore. It's called vampire dude. I don't know. He really has gone crazy. But that whole hospital thing was pretty cool. We had the ice wall with the zombies bashing against it. Perfect for a Halloween episode. Love that they must know that fans obviously love the Killer Frost weapons. This episode we got freaking Killer Frost knuckle dusters. Just keep at it with more and more stuff like that. I don't know what they're going to come up with next, but I'm sure they're going to come up with another weapon that will just make me think that's badass. And now Barry is more or less of the mind that if it's the last thing he does, as the Flash, since Crisis is obviously going to kill him, then he's going to have to stop blood work. And then Flash, did you have to do this to me? Another Barry and Joe scene that actually made me cry. It did. I'm normally one who would get emotional over emotional moments in TV shows anyway, but when you do scenes like this, man, it was the culmination of what I described earlier, of each team member of the Flash team really struggling with Barry, who's going to die. And I think Joe, this was portrayed very, very well, because it seems that he's, I've been a bit surprised almost, looking back at it, with how well he's been dealing with, his son, if you will, who's going to just die, and he's been giving him these wise words, saying about the Call of Duty a couple of episodes back. But now, just seeing him break down, Jesse L. Martin just absolutely killed it, and Grant Gustin, but it was just great. As messed up as that sounds, just seeing Joe this vulnerable, like he's not being strong, and he doesn't think it's fair, and he's practically angry that Barry doesn't deserve this, and this just isn't right. Even though Barry's obviously going to stick around and we're going to get him throughout the rest of the Flash season 6, moments like this, even though we know that Barry's going to be alright eventually, really does suspend the disbelief of knowing that, if that makes sense. It makes me feel like they're trying to drill all of this in, this whole time, this season with Barry dying. I'm like, yeah, well, we know he's good, but this moment was like, oh crap, I actually believe that Barry's gonna go, and what are we gonna do, kind of thing. So great, that was a great scene. And then lastly, everyone, is of course we have to talk about that ending with Nash Wells, who has seemingly tracked down the Monitor's hideout on Earth, if you will. That is what's under that manhole. It's actually pretty funny to imagine the Monitor just going down a manhole like that. I'm sure he doesn't need to. He can just conjure himself wherever. He used that little thing he got off Cisco. It kind of gave this holographic simulation of what has happened before, with the Monitor walking into his hideout, I'm guessing. And that is the Monitor. Unless they're making it look like the Monitor when really it's somebody else, like the Anti-Monitor. I'm just guessing that somebody's going to say that in the comments. That was definitely LaMonica Garrett's Monitor. I don't know if they're going to try and flip that round, but it looks like Nash Wells is searching for him. Now, I don't know what they're doing with this whole Pariah situation. It does seem like he is going to end up being Pariah. I mean, and there's stuff to contradict that as well, but it just really does feel like that's going to be the case. But yet again, I don't know how they're going to make that happen with the way that goes down in the comics, with Crisis having already started. But then again, I expect the CW to do their own little twist and iteration of Crisis on Infinite Earths anyway. Of course, is going to be different than the comic book version. It would just be really cool, just right from the top of my head, if the reason why this new Harrison Nash Wells is after the Monitor is maybe because the Monitor, just like he did in Elseworlds, destroyed many Earths trying to find heroes, and maybe Nash Wells made it out just in time like Earth 90's Flash did, and he's just trying to track him down or something like that. That's completely random. And I know it's not exactly what happens in the comic books in terms of a Pariah connection, but it would be like a nice little way as to why he's so adamant about tracking this dude down. I mean, let me know what you think. Let me know what your theories are. That's the main priority I want from you guys, but also let me know your thoughts on this episode in general anyway. It was a good Halloween episode, solid Flash episode. Like, wasn't my favorite of the season so far, but it was nearly. it felt like a normal episode, but of season 6. They're really establishing this new separate storyline thing really, really well, as I keep echoing throughout my reviews. It was mixed in with some very tear-jerking emotional moments. Other than that though, everyone, if you enjoyed this review, I would really, really appreciate it if you click that like button. I know some people don't do it even if they're watching right now, but if you do, go ahead and do it. I really appreciate you very, very much. That was cheesy, but seriously, I do. If you want to join my Discord server, and why would you want to do that? So you can talk with me outside this video and comment section. I reply to people on there. I'm very active, so check out my server link in a top pinned comment. Other than that, guys, check out my past couple of videos here, and that is absolutely everything. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you speedsters in the next video. Goodbye.